Emma Carter never imagined that her wedding day would feel like a business agreement. At 29, she had dreamed of marrying someone she loved. Instead, she stood in a small English church beside Daniel Whitmore, a wealthy divorced man she barely knew. Daniel was 37. He was respected, successful, and known for one painful detail about his past. Everyone believed he was infertile. His first marriage had ended after years of unsuccessful attempts to have children. When Daniel's former wife finally left him, the village decided it knew the reason. Emma's mother knew the truth. Her family's bakery was drowning in debt. The bank had given them only weeks to save the business. Daniel offered to pay everything, but there was one condition. He wanted Emma to marry him. Emma had refused at first. "You can't expect me to marry a man I don't love," she told her mother. Her mother lowered her eyes. "I know." "Then why are you asking?" "Because if we lose the bakery, we lose our home too." Emma looked at her younger brother, Oliver. She knew what was at stake, so she agreed. The wedding was quiet. There were no huge celebrations, no romantic honeymoon. After the ceremony, Daniel drove Emma to his large country house. Emma expected him to behave like a controlling husband. Instead, he surprised her. "You'll have your own room," he said. Emma looked at him. "You're not expecting anything from me?" Daniel shook his head. "You agreed to marry me because your family needed help. I won't make your life harder." That sentence changed the way Emma saw him. Daniel was distant, but he wasn't cruel. Over the next few months, they slowly became comfortable around each other. They had breakfast together. They talked about work. Sometimes Daniel drove Emma to the bakery. Sometimes Emma stayed up late helping him organize paperwork. They even began laughing together. But neither admitted that something deeper was developing. Then Emma started feeling different. At first, she blamed exhaustion. She became unusually tired. Certain foods suddenly made her uncomfortable. One morning, she walked into the kitchen and smelled fresh coffee. Normally, coffee was her favorite drink. But suddenly, the smell made her stomach turn. Emma rushed outside. Daniel followed her. "Emma, are you all right?" She nodded quickly. "I'm fine." "You said that 3 times this week." She looked at him. "I think I'm just tired." Daniel studied her face. Then he asked quietly, "Could you be pregnant?" Emma froze. The question seemed impossible. "Daniel, that's not funny. I'm not joking." She stared at him. Everyone believed Daniel couldn't have children. Even Daniel believed it. Still, they decided to visit a private clinic. The doctor examined Emma and ordered several tests. When the results came back, the doctor smiled. "Congratulations, Mrs. Whitmore." Emma's eyes widened. Daniel stopped breathing for a moment. "She's pregnant?" The doctor nodded. "Yes." Emma instinctively touched her stomach. She was carrying Daniel's child. But Daniel looked completely stunned. For years, he had believed he was infertile. The doctor then looked at his medical records. "There's something unusual here." Daniel frowned. "What?" "Your previous diagnosis doesn't seem complete." Daniel's face changed. "What are you saying?" The doctor explained that his old records showed a medical condition, but they did not prove that he was permanently infertile. Someone had apparently given him a conclusion that was much stronger than the evidence supported. Daniel couldn't understand. His former wife had told him they could never have children. His family had accepted it. He had accepted it. And now Emma was pregnant. On the drive home, neither of them spoke. Finally, Emma reached across the car and held his hand. "Daniel." He looked at her. "Are you angry?" "No." "Then what are you feeling?" Daniel looked ahead. For the first time in years. He paused. "I don't know what to believe." Emma squeezed his hand. "You can believe this." She smiled gently. "We're going to have a baby." Daniel looked at her. A small smile appeared on his face. It was the first truly happy smile Emma had seen from him. But when they arrived home, someone was waiting outside. Daniel's older brother, Richard. Richard looked at Emma, then at Daniel, then at the doctor's envelope in Daniel's hand. His expression immediately changed. "You went to the doctor?" Daniel nodded. Richard swallowed. "Why?" Daniel answered calmly. "Because Emma is pregnant." Richard's face went pale. Emma noticed. Daniel noticed too, and suddenly, both understood something important. Richard wasn't shocked because Daniel had become a father. He was shocked because he seemed to know exactly why it had happened. Daniel stepped toward his brother. "What aren't you telling me?" Richard said nothing. Daniel's voice became firmer. "Richard." Finally, Richard looked at Emma. Then he whispered, "You need to know the truth about your marriage." Emma's heart began pounding. "What truth?" Richard looked at Daniel. "The reason your family wanted this marriage was never the bakery." Daniel stared at him. Richard continued, "They knew Emma could become pregnant." Emma's face went pale. "How could they possibly know that?" Richard didn't answer. Instead, he pulled an old document from his briefcase. Daniel opened it. His expression changed instantly. The document contained his original medical records, and one sentence had been marked in red. Daniel read it again. Then again, his hands began shaking. The diagnosis everyone had believed for years was not what the original doctor had written. Someone had changed the meaning of the report. Someone had made Daniel believe he could never have children, and now Emma was pregnant. The question was no longer whether Daniel was the father. The question was much more frightening. Why had someone deliberately made him believe he was infertile? And why had Emma been brought into his life? Daniel stood in the study, holding the old medical report. He couldn't take his eyes away from it. For years, he had believed one sentence that had completely changed his life. Now he was discovering that sentence had been misunderstood or deliberately altered. Emma stood beside him. "What does it say?" Daniel slowly handed her the document. Emma read it. Her eyes widened. "It says your condition was treatable." Daniel nodded. "That's what I thought." "Then why did everyone tell you that you couldn't have children?" Daniel looked toward the window. "I don't know." Richard remained silent. Daniel turned toward him. "You knew about this." Richard hesitated. "I knew something was wrong." "That's not an answer." Richard sighed. "Your father knew." Daniel froze. "My father?" Richard nodded. "He received the original report years ago." Daniel's voice became quiet. "And he never told me?" "No." Emma looked between the brothers. "Why?" Richard didn't answer immediately. Finally, he said, "Because your father was terrified of what would happen to the company." Daniel stared at him. "What does my fertility have to do with the company?" Richard explained that their father's business empire had been facing serious legal problems years earlier. There had been concerns about inheritance, ownership, and control. Daniel was expected to inherit everything. But there was one problem. A rival family had been trying to gain influence over the company. Daniel's father believed that if Daniel remained unmarried and childless, certain family members would have more power over the inheritance. So he made a decision, a terrible one. He allowed Daniel to believe he could never become a father. Daniel slowly sat down. "My own father did this?" Richard nodded. "But why, Emma?" Richard looked at her. That's where things become complicated. Emma felt a chill despite the bright afternoon sunlight coming through the windows. Richard explained that Emma's family had once been connected to Daniel's father through a business agreement. Years earlier, Emma's late father had helped protect the Whitmore family from financial disaster. Daniel's father had never forgotten it. But there was another reason. Emma had a reputation for being honest, responsible, and loyal. Daniel's father believed she would make the perfect wife for his son. Emma shook her head. "So the marriage was planned?" Richard looked down. "Not exactly." "What does that mean?" "The debt was real." Emma stared at him. But the offer from Daniel wasn't completely his idea. Daniel suddenly stood. "Richard," his brother looked at him. "You mean my father arranged the debt?" Richard hesitated. "I don't know if he created it, but he certainly used it." Daniel's expression hardened. Emma suddenly understood. Her family had believed they were trapped by financial problems. Daniel had believed he was entering a practical marriage. But someone had been moving pieces behind them, and now Emma was pregnant. That made everything far more serious. Later that afternoon, Daniel drove Emma to the bakery. He didn't tell her where they were going. When they arrived, Emma saw her mother standing outside. Her mother immediately looked nervous. Daniel stepped out of the car. "Mrs. Carter, we need to talk." Emma's mother looked at him. Then she noticed the medical documents. Her face changed. You found out. Emma's heart dropped. You knew. Her mother closed her eyes. Not everything. Emma's voice shook. Did you know Daniel was infertile? Her mother looked at Daniel, then at Emma. I was told he couldn't have children. By whom? She hesitated. His father? Daniel's jaw tightened. Why would he tell you? Because he wanted me to believe the marriage would never produce a child. Emma stared at her mother. Why would that matter? Her mother began crying. Because he wanted your marriage to remain a financial arrangement. Daniel looked confused. Why? Because he feared that if you had a child, the child would eventually inherit the Whitmore estate. Silence filled the bakery. Daniel slowly understood. Someone had been trying to control his future family before that family even existed. But there was still one question. Why did your mother agree? Emma looked at her mother. Her mother whispered, Because I was promised that your brother's education would be paid for. Emma's face fell. Everything had been manipulated. The debt, the marriage, the medical story. But there was one detail nobody had expected. The baby. That evening, Daniel and Emma returned home. For the first time since their wedding, they sat together in the garden without feeling like strangers. Daniel placed his hand gently over Emma's. I'm sorry. Emma looked at him. For what? For bringing you into this. You didn't. My family did. Emma smiled faintly. Daniel, when I married you, I thought I was sacrificing my future. He looked at her. But now... She touched her stomach. Now I think my future might be the best thing that ever happened to me. Daniel smiled. Then his expression became serious. I don't want our child to grow up surrounded by people who manipulate us. Neither do I. We need to find out who started this. Emma nodded. The next morning, Daniel contacted the specialist who had treated him years earlier. The doctor agreed to meet them. When they arrived, the doctor looked shocked to see Daniel. I thought you knew. Daniel frowned. Knew what? The doctor opened an old file. I never diagnosed you as permanently infertile. Emma looked at Daniel. The doctor continued. I told your father that your condition might affect fertility, but treatment could improve your chances considerably. Daniel's hands tightened. So someone changed the information. Yes. The doctor pointed to the old paperwork. This copy is mine. Daniel stared at it. Who signed it? The doctor examined the page. Then he looked up. Someone from your father's legal office. Daniel's face hardened. He immediately understood. The problem wasn't just his family. Someone outside the family had been involved, and that person still had access to the Whitmore estate. Before they left the clinic, the doctor gave Daniel one final piece of information. There is something else. Daniel turned. What? The original file contains a note. The doctor handed him the paper. Daniel read it. The note was dated years earlier. It said, Patients should not be informed until family legal matters are resolved. Daniel's blood ran cold. Emma read the sentence over his shoulder. Someone had deliberately decided that Daniel should not know the truth about his own body. And now, because Emma was pregnant, that secret was finally coming apart. But when Daniel returned home that afternoon, he discovered something even more disturbing. His father's old office had been opened. The room had been untouched for years, except someone had recently searched through the files. Daniel stood in the doorway. Emma looked at him. Someone was here. Daniel nodded. Then he noticed an envelope lying on the desk. His name was written across it. He opened it carefully. Inside was a single photograph. It showed Daniel's father standing beside Emma's father many years earlier. On the back was a handwritten sentence. The marriage was never the real plan. Daniel looked at Emma. What does that mean? Emma shook her head. I don't know. Then another paper slipped from the envelope. Daniel picked it up. It contained a date from years before Emma and Daniel had ever met. And beneath the date was a name. Emma Carter. Emma's face went pale. Why would my name be there? Daniel didn't answer, because suddenly the mystery was much bigger than their marriage. Someone had been planning something involving Emma long before she ever agreed to marry Daniel. And the baby she was carrying might have been the one thing that could finally expose the entire truth. Emma stared at the old document. Her name was written at the top. The date was from 11 years earlier. She was only 18 at the time. Daniel, I don't understand. Daniel looked equally confused. Neither do I. They spent the morning going through the old files. Eventually, they discovered a connection. Emma's father had once worked with Daniel's father on a major property project. The project had almost failed. Emma's father had discovered financial wrongdoing and refused to participate. Instead of exposing the problem publicly, he quietly protected several employees who would have lost their jobs. Daniel's father had promised to repay the favor. But years later, that promise became something very different. He began treating Emma as the person who could eventually bring stability to the Whitmore family. Daniel couldn't believe it. My father planned my marriage before I even met Emma. Emma shook her head. But why convince everyone that you were infertile? They finally found the answer in another file. Daniel's father had been afraid that his son would marry someone who wanted the Whitmore fortune. He believed that if Daniel thought he couldn't have children, he would avoid marriage altogether. Then, when financial problems appeared in Emma's family, the opportunity came. Emma needed help. Daniel needed a wife. And Daniel's father believed he could control both situations. But there was one thing he had never predicted. Daniel and Emma would actually fall in love. The marriage that had begun as an arrangement had slowly become real. And now they were expecting a baby. That afternoon, Daniel gathered his family at this estate. His mother arrived first, then Richard. Finally, several trusted family advisors joined them. Daniel placed the original medical report on the table. I want everyone to look at this. Nobody spoke. Daniel's mother read it. Her face became pale. You found it. Daniel looked at her. You knew. She lowered her eyes. I knew your father had made mistakes. That isn't what I asked. She took a breath. Yes. Emma felt her heart sink. Daniel stared at his mother. For years, you let me believe I couldn't have children. I thought your father was protecting you. Protecting me from what? From people who wanted your inheritance. Daniel laughed bitterly, and he became the person controlling my life. His mother had no answer. Emma stepped forward. We aren't here to destroy this family. Everyone looked at her. We just want the truth. Daniel nodded. And we want our child to grow up knowing that his parents chose each other. His mother began to cry. Then she finally admitted something. Daniel's father had not been the only person involved. His former wife had known too. Emma looked at Daniel. Daniel's expression changed. She knew. His mother nodded. She knew you weren't permanently infertile. Daniel closed his eyes. His first marriage suddenly looked completely different. He remembered all the arguments, all the doctor's appointments, all the times his former wife had told him that their marriage was hopeless. He had believed every word. Now, he realized he had been manipulated. But there was still one final question. Why had his former wife participated? The answer came later that day. Daniel contacted her. She agreed to meet them at a quiet cafe. When she arrived, she looked nervous. Daniel didn't waste time. Did you know I was infertile? She looked down. Yes. Emma felt her stomach tighten. Why? His former wife sighed. Because your father offered me a settlement. Daniel's face hardened. What did he want? He wanted me to leave you. Why? Because he believed you were about to marry someone else. Daniel stared at her. I wasn't. I know. She looked at Emma. Your father had already selected someone. Emma frowned. Who? The woman shook her head. I never learned her name. Daniel leaned forward. Then why did you accept? She looked ashamed. Because I was frightened. The truth was painful. Daniel's former wife had been pressured into leaving him. Daniel's father had created a false narrative around infertility. And Emma's family had been pushed toward a marriage that looked like a financial solution. Every decision had been influenced. But one thing couldn't be controlled. Love. Daniel looked at Emma. I don't want anyone deciding our future again. Emma smiled. Neither do I. Months passed. Emma's pregnancy progressed normally. Her morning sickness eventually became less severe. The village, which had once whispered about their marriage, now talked about something completely different. Everyone knew Emma was expecting, but nobody knew the entire truth. Then came the day of the family celebration. The Whitmore estate was filled with relatives and close friends. Emma stood beside Daniel in the garden. She wore a simple blue dress. Daniel couldn't stop smiling. When everyone gathered, Daniel raised his glass. "I want to say something." The room became quiet. "For years, I believed I couldn't have children." People looked at him. That belief shaped my marriage, my divorce, and almost every major decision I made. He looked at Emma. "Then I married someone I barely knew." Emma smiled, and she changed everything. Daniel placed his hand over hers. "Our baby wasn't part of anyone's plan." A few people laughed softly. "But that's exactly why this child means so much to us." Emma's eyes filled with tears. Daniel continued, "Our marriage may have started because other people thought they could control our lives." He paused. "But it became a marriage because we chose each other." Everyone applauded. Even Daniel's mother stood crying. Then Emma suddenly felt dizzy. Daniel immediately noticed. "Emma?" She smiled. "I'm all right." But her hand moved instinctively toward her stomach. The baby kicked. Daniel placed his hand beside hers. Everyone watched. For the first time, there was no scandal, no manipulation, no rumors, just a family waiting for a new beginning. Several months later, Emma gave birth to a healthy baby boy. Daniel was beside her throughout the entire experience. When he first held his son, he couldn't speak. Emma smiled weakly. "What's wrong?" Daniel looked at the baby. "Nothing." He kissed his son's forehead. "I just spent years believing I would never have this." Emma reached for his hand. Maybe life was waiting for the right moment. Daniel looked at her. "No," he smiled. "Maybe life was waiting for you." Emma laughed through her tears. Their son was named Thomas. And the story that had begun with a forced marriage eventually became one of the greatest love stories their family had ever known. Emma never forgot the reason she had first said yes. She had married Daniel to save her family. But she stayed because she discovered something she never expected. The man everyone called an infertile divorced millionaire wasn't broken. He had simply been surrounded by people who had lied to him. And the woman who had been forced to become his wife became the person who helped him reclaim his life. Their marriage had started as an arrangement. Their child had been called impossible. But in the end, the greatest twist wasn't the pregnancy. It was the fact that two people who had entered marriage without love eventually built a family based entirely on choice. And that was the truth nobody could take away from them.